And it's 5 minutes after 8. You're welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Nisim 95.9 and 100.1 in Bogatanga and Tamale, respectively. Also live on our social media handles, ETV Ghana, and that's on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. And so you can follow the conversation and share your thoughts with us on the subject matter for this evening we are talking about. Tonight, we are talking about an issue which got many Ghanaians sitting on tenterhooks, concerned about the SIM cards that they have in their phones as a result of the deadline which had been given them by the Ministry of Communications that by the end of the month of July, if they had not been able to re-register their SIM cards would be deactivated. We saw very many Ghanaians going to their various, telcos, like MTN, Vodafone, Glow, or maybe Airtel Tigo, to go and ensure that their SIM cards are registered. And so there were long queues at most of these telcos and their offices. But also, worrying many Ghanaians was the issue of the primary document which was going to be used for the registration exercise, and that was the Ghana card. Many Ghanaians had been complaining about the cumbersome process they had to go through in order to acquire a Ghana card to register their SIM cards. These raised many questions in the minds of many Ghanaians as to why the Ministry of Communication, was not willing to extend the deadline for the registration exercise, considering that it was not the fault of Ghanaians that they were not being able to register. But again, it brought in the issue of the attitude of Ghanaians. Was it the usual last-minute wait-and-see attitude that got us to the point where many individuals were found at the registration centers trying to meet the deadline, or it was just a matter of the Ministry of Communications and the NIA not being able to come together to ensure Ghanaians get registered? These are the issues we are discussing tonight. Is it a matter of the attitude of Ghanaians? Is it a matter of the lack of communication between the Ministry of Communications and the NIA, who are the custodians of the database which Ghanaians gave them at the time that we were doing the voter registration exercise, and the expectation that any other process we were going to go through would be based on the data which they had collected? Remember that the Ministry of Communications is collecting new data. And if you remember the leaked report or letter which came from the NIA, they had actually distanced themselves from the new registration exercise and the data which is being collected by the Ministry of Communication. The issue about data protection as to who should keep the biometric information which is being collected has also popped up. And so we are looking at all of these matters, especially whether the 30th of September deadline which has been given Ghanaians would suffice, seeing that a lot more Ghanaians still don't have their Ghana card. That's our focus tonight, even as I'm joined on the show this evening by my guest via Zoom to interrogate this matter. Do kindly stay with us. We'll take a short breather. When we come back, that will be the focus tonight. And you're welcome back to Fact Sheets live on ETV, live on Nisim 95.9 and 100.1, also live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is ETV Ghana. So tonight, to help me understand the issues therein, I'm joined via Zoom by Mr. Kwame Griffiths, who's an IT expert, and also joined by Mr. Peter Bismarck Kofi, who is Executive Director for ELAPI, for us to interrogate the issues. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Good evening.
All right, so let me start, and it's a general one. Any one of you can pick up that question if you have the answer to it. We ask, could we have avoided the pressure that mounted at the various telecommunications, network offices over the period, the last part of the week of July? Could we have avoided that?
I think that yes, we probably couldn't have, because you know that when you have these mass registrations, most people will come in during the last, they'll wait until the very last minute. But what we could have done better was that the ministry could have waited until the last day of, I mean, in the first case in March, they have postponed it twice. In March, one was not handled properly, but this one was probably managed better, in the sense that in March, the deadline was supposed to be 31st. Then they came up with a postponement on the 22nd. And so they lost a lot of, people who could have taken advantage of the last week, because most Ghanaians will do this the last minute. I mean, judging from previous mass registration exercises that have been involved. So the last bit, yes, we couldn't have really, in terms of the SIM card registration, it's just a general attitude. However, the issues concerning the NIA and, the fact that people have paid visit to them, numerous occasions to get their card, I think that really intensified, because they needed that card to be able to register with the SIM card. So I think that one, yes, there is something that could have been done in that aspect.
Interesting position you hold there. And so the question that would be asked, if you look at the NIA and the data that is put out there, it tells you that there are countless number of people whose cards have been ready for a long time, and that these individuals have not picked up their, cards which is with them. Is it not still a matter of the attitude of the Ghanaian? Regardless, even if all these cards were to have been ready, we still have had people whose cards are ready and yet would not have gone to collect them, also doing last minute with the NIA, and that would have, not provided the opportunity for them to register their SIM cards.
Well, with the NIA, I don't think it is the attitude of Ghanaians, because the NIA, in their own, correspondence to the general public, indicated that they were going to have an instant issuance solution, which means that when you visit the registration centers, you walk home with a card. This was what the NIA said. So the expectation is that, if you have registered, let's say 1 million people, then because it is instant issuance, you don't go and do data processing and come back to distribute cards. So in that case, you should have given cards to maybe 1 million or just a little less. Because people, some cases would be adjudicated based on the fact that it might be attempted double registration or whatever. But those are very few. But if you look at the NIA data, you'd realize that they themselves have indicated that they took from Statistical Service 19.9, which is about 20 million registrable population. And out of that, they have registered 17.2 million. And out of the 17.2 million, they have issued cards to 15.7 million, which is a very good achievement, by the way. But it also tells you that there is some 1.5 million people who have presented themselves for registration and have been registered, but have not received their cards. So it means, and through no fault of theirs, if your solution was supposed to deliver cards instantly. So it tells you that, you cannot fault Ghanaians for, the fact that, about 1.5 million of them, at least at the minimum, do not have their cards. That is also not to say that everybody who presented themselves for registration actually got registered. Some people have been there a few times and have not gotten registered. So, but that's, having said that, I would also indicate that, this is not to say that NIA has done a poor job. I think they've done a very good job. At least for the first time, we have a national database that has 17.2 million records, with very good biometrics, fingerprints, iris, and then facial. So I think that, with time, they should be able to to more or less get close to finishing.
Now, let me start with you as well, Mr. Kofi. There are those who hold the view that we are where we are as a result of the attempt of collecting fresh biometric information from Ghanaians, and that if we had resorted to the database of the NIA, would not be where we are today. What's your take on that?
Right. A very good evening to your choice viewers. Yeah, it's true. You know, it's a matter of synchronization, I think, because you already have the raw data of the NIA. So if you really want to register your SIM card, remember that anytime you go for a registration, within the registration process, your telephone number is collected as part of the registration form. It's on the form. As many as you can provide your telephone numbers, your phone numbers. So already your contact is in the data of NIA. So for the telcos to have your data, it's a matter of synchronization. Synchronize NIA data with the telcos, then you have the data already done. So you don't need to go back again and queue. Because remember, the first time we went out to register with the NIA, we queued in the process, and then we were issued these cards, not in per se, but then we've gone for them. So it's a matter of just synchronization, and then you are through the process. So I think because we don't have a system that could synchronize what NIA is having, that's caused all these things. So I think we have to beef up our IT system in terms of synchronization. So you could have the electoral commission also synchronized. So currently, if we are not careful, it obviously means that certain other institutions that might say, yes, we also want to register it because we cannot synchronize the NIA data set. So for telcos, it's a matter of phone numbers, which were collected. Just like the Gmails or emails and stuff, we synchronize them. So it's obviously that if you have your phone and you have synchronized your phone with your email, wherever you pick it up, you can just go in and then access your email. So synchronization was the biggest challenge I think I saw between NIA and then telcos, because the system looks huge for NIA and that of the telcos. So that system isn't there, and that's what NIA must accept. And then the Ministry of Communication must accept that they don't have that system to easily synchronize. However, good things have been done because the banks have been able to synchronize. So if the banks could synchronize, why can't the telcos also synchronize easily as the banks have done that? The DVLA and others are all trying to synchronize the process so that when you go to DVLA as we speak, you can use the Ghana card to, go through the process. So I think the telcos had a challenge with NIA synchronization system. That is where we are now.
Now, there's a question I've been asking, and that has to do with how really and indeed biometric the data the telcos are collecting is. Because when I had the experience of registering my SIM card, it was only photographs of my fingerprints that were captured by some phone application with a camera, and that was it. Now, can these phones be able to capture our biometric information simply through picture taking?
Do I take it?
Yes,
okay,
you can.
Now, let me say that I would like to indicate that the last speaker made a very good point. And then, but and then with your, before probably I take your question, the Ministry of Communications is condemned by law to plug into the NIA system. That is what we have all agreed as a nation. But you see, we have always had this problem, and I have been very passionate about this because both registrations, more or less, I can call my babies. The NIA registration, I designed the current system, more or less specifications for the current system. And I was right from the beginning, the first meeting that decided on the SIM card registration, I was part of it. And somewhere in 2014, when it became obvious that the nation was wasting a lot of money on biometric registration, every country needs one civil biometric system and one criminal biometric system. One civil biometric and one criminal biometric system is enough, irrespective of the size of the nation. The unique ID of India has done more than a billion registrations. They have one. Chinese people have one. The Chinese smart card has one. Now, in our case, by 2014, we had bought 11 biometric systems, and each one is costing at least around $60 million. So there was a letter that came from the center of government, signed by the chief of staff then, Professor Prosper Bani, indicating that no government institution should buy any new biometric system. I mean, the most annoying part was that in terms of, I think 2 of the systems, we had paid for the license twice. And that is Bank of Ghana had procured Sergeant Mofo system for eSwitch. So we had bought the license for Sergeant Mofo AFIS system. And NIA had also bought the Sergeant Mofo license for the AFIS system within a span of 1 year. So, and most of these institutions were just citing issues with the NIA system, that the data was not adequate for their needs and what have you. So NIA was giving the marching orders to make sure that the database had the requisite data that would be useful to the DVLAs, to the NHIAs, to the passport office and what have you. So that journey was embarked on. And the objective of which was to have an integrated system so we don't duplicate biometric systems, and to have a multifunctional card so that you don't have multiple cards in your wallet. The NHIA card, the NIA card can be used for that purpose, you know. So this is where we are as a nation. Thankfully, this new administration embraced this concept and moved forward. So the issue of the telcos through the Ministry of Communication picking new biometrics is very surprising to me. And they are not doing it well. You said it right. This concept of contactless capturing of fingerprint is not supported by any of the international standards. There are a lot of research going on because of COVID. Because of COVID, there's the desire that if you can pick fingerprints without contacts, so you don't put your hand on any plate or any machine to capture, it will be fine. But it is still in the research, stage. NIST has not supported this yet. So I mean, not only have not supported it yet, they have reservations about it. So the issue here is that what are those fingerprints being used for? Is NCA through the Ministry of Communication creating their own biometric database? Because the issue is not just about cost, it is also about security. That is why we said these duplications of biometric systems shouldn't happen. All right,
now there's a very important question I need to ask at this point. Since you've been in the system and you've been an integral part of the development of this program, how difficult or easy is it to plug into the system of the NIA by any institution or state?
It shouldn't be difficult at all. In fact, the card itself has what we call match on card. Now, what that means is that you have a template of the holder's fingerprint on the card. So you don't even need to plug into the central system. You can easily, if you buy the right readers, you can read the template of the fingerprint on the card, capture new prints and match without even hitting the NIA database. So it is not something that is difficult at all. Then again, the NIA system is in, one of the revenue streams is this SIM card registration, which now is being taken over by another institution, in accordance with LI 2111, which was passed in 2012, by the way. It talks about the mandatory use of NIA card, and it places elections, it places SIM card registration, all bank transactions as being the NIA card being the mandatory card to be used to register. Which means that by not using the NIA card, of course, people take the NIA card, you pick the PIN number. That's about it. Then I'm sure perhaps they are doing portrait matching, which is photo matching. That's very easy. Accuracy level, very small. So the most accurate way is to go fingerprint. And that means they have to plug into the NIA system. But here's the case, they are collecting fresh new fingerprints. And only God knows, because it's not playing any role in the verification process leading to them agreeing to register your SIM card. So what is that being used for? I think that is a question we all need to ask them.
It's interesting that you make this point, because I was listening to an interview which the Minister for Communications had granted to one of the sister networks this morning, I believe. And she rather laid the blame at the NIA for not utilizing the National Data Center, which has the capacity to store all the data of Ghanaians on their system so as to allow for easy synchronization and plug-in by the telcos into the system. What's your position on that?
Well, let me say that Minister is speaking that way because she probably knows next to nothing about how these systems work. I have several systems that are running. The servers are not here. Some of them are in Germany. It doesn't matter the physical location of the data. It really doesn't. Most important thing is for you to reach it. So it's never the case that because it's probably not at, I'm assuming he's trying to say it's not at the NITA data center.
Exactly.
That is what he's trying to say. But it doesn't really matter at all. You can plug into the database, irrespective of its physical location. The fact that it could be sitting on the same rack, and by the rack, I mean those giant things that you have the servers plugged in.
Yeah.
They could be sitting on the same rack. But if you don't have the necessary protocols and what have you to plug into it, you still cannot plug into it. So I think the minister is just making, excuses. In fact, a lot of blame has been shifted on the NIA. But let's not forget that the NIA has 15.7 million cards in the hands of Ghanaians. And there's still a huge number of those that have not been registered onto the SIM card database. You understand what I'm saying? It's still a huge number. I am very, very interested in seeing how, we can achieve, this completion of SIM registration in the next 2 months, when we have used 8 months to do 62%, to do 38%. How can we do that in 60? So I think whoever is advising the minister, it's probably not giving her the right information. I don't blame her. She's a lawyer. She's not a technical person. But I think that she's not being informed, on issues properly.
Mr. Kofi, let me take your thoughts on the issue of data protection as to the telcos now having access to the private personal biometric information of Ghanaians as to where it's being held, as to what it's going to be used for. Is there any guarantee, is there any protection level at all for citizens with respect to this data which is being collected?
Data protection is a human right. It's the right of the state to protect the information and data of every citizen. It is neither the right of any private individual or entity to hold the sensitive information of, citizens of a country. So as a fundamental, not necessarily a fundamental human right, but looks like a third generational right, it is the state's duty to ensure that our details are highly protected. Now, for you to give these informations similar to what you have to a private entity, it's quite a violation of these rights. I mean, right to data protection. And that right to data protection has been violated by the government. But it looks like most of the lawyers that went to court did not look at it in the human right perspective. They looked at it in terms of legal structures. So yes, it's the right of the state to, to have that. Why then do we have the telcos also taking the data or the information of the citizens again? So looking at the legal structures to fight the state might not be able to be, might not be possible. But if you go to the angle of fundamental, human rights perspective, where it is the right of the state to protect mine data and not the telcos having mine data, which is equally important to you, the state. You get it? Because you shouldn't give that data to anyone. And because we are also not well informed about some of these third generational rights, we allow some of these things to go on. And it's happening. And it's just wrong for us to have that, because, we had a Data Protection Act. And there's no part of Data Protection Act that is stating that, private individuals like ETV can take the data information of, guests like us, biometric, take our facial and fingerprints and everything about us and keep it as part of their information they have with ETV. It's quite wrong. No one can do that. So if you really want to, as a matter of policy, it is the state shouldn't have allowed this. But no, we have seen countless number of state violations. Starting number of right violations ongoing, but we do not talk about all these things. So the state has monopolized that violence and is taking control over these kind of rights. And each and every day, some of these things are happening. If you go to DVLA, for example, to some extent, they have to take some fingerprints of yours. You get it? And that's there. You have the, but remember that the DVLA is a state institution. You have the Electoral Commission also doing the same thing. It's also a state institution. The Senate is also doing similar things. It's also a state institution. But what about the telcos? Government do not own any of the telcos. Currently, we heard the Airtel Tigo had been bought by the states. But what about MTN and Vodafone? It's not owned by the states. So for you to, collect the information of individuals in the country, it's a strong violation of rights. And we are all sitting down. And it's so sad, because the moment you try to talk about some of these things, you are targeted differently. And it's just not right for the state to violate that right. And it's against, international standards, as the IT expert is talking about. It's against international standards, because in the form of data collection we are going through at the telcos, it's just not right. You see, if you read minutes into it, you ask yourself, where is this data going? And what is it going to be used for? You see, because it's so simple for you to just synchronize and plug in and have that data and move on. But if the NIS data looks substandard for the telcos to plug in, then there's a challenge with the NIS data set. And that is where the state must quickly work on, because the Ministry of Communication cannot just come out and talk to us and tell us we just go to the telcos because the telcos are under you. What about we hear the Ministry of Information coming up and saying that before you go into the radio station or before you go into other places, you also have to have your biometric with this institution. Then the airports will also start with this, that before you go out, give me your biometric information because we don't trust the NIA. Now, remember, there was a time we were asked to register our SIM cards with our ID cards. What happened to those information? So the way information are being scattered, we're all happy to have a centralized system of information where data is protected by the state. But it looks like that protection of our data is no more, because the Ghana card is currently in the hands of the telcos, and the telcos at the same time taking our fingerprints and keeping them. And then government is happy that this is ongoing. So there should be an extension, there should be this, there should be that. That as a matter of policy, that isn't right. Now, I forgot to add this about the issue where we shouldn't be here. Look, any serious government or state or any ministry and any state agency, before you embark on some of these exercises, even though, yes, you are violating our right in terms of data protection, you should look at the demography of the various districts and regions. And currently we have the population and housing census data. So you should expand the centers, because you know very well that maybe in Ashanti region, there are about 2 million people in a particular location. There are about 1.5 million in a particular location, about 200,000 within a particular enclave. Therefore, if we look at the time within which one person will register, maybe at 10 minutes, then we could have about 10 centers within a particular enclave based on the population or the demography. Then we can quickly get these things done. But we are not taking time as a factor. So we are not looking at demography. And you could have one, if you go to the eastern part of the country, you see that you would have one MTN center serving about 25 to 30 communities. And these communities are somehow far or distance away from the center. And you could see the pressure. You see, so any serious government that want to take policy and work within policy for efficiency's sake, you have to look at demography and have these centers started out. And within a month or two, you are done. You see, so yes, we've been here because we didn't look at the policy part of it. We've been here because the state is into a violation of our data. And that is where we've seen what is happening. And so, instead of the state to even recognize the data violations, it is still extending its monopoly of violation on us for an extra 2 months. And we are still there. And you see, Ghana Bar Association is there. We have the human rights lawyers, they are all there. And no one is looking at it. Because if you go to the structures, the government and the state will use the structures against you. And then you have different ways of arguing this thing in court. And I'm looking at any lawyer going to court with the part of the human rights so that our data will be protected as against the private entities. Because the private entities are even not Ghanaians. Remember, all these telcos are owned by foreigners. They are owned by foreigners. They are not Ghanaians.
Now,
where exactly are they storing our data?
Just a quick one before we go for a breather. Now, we speak about the worth of the data which is being collected. Now, how valuable is this information? If my fingerprint information is being captured, if my age, my name, my location is being captured, in terms of today's technology world, what's the value of the data? What's the worth of the data being collected? Mr. Kofi?
No, see, for data collection, no matter how you pick it up, it's valuable. I mean, you look at it in the aspect of security. I mean, for security's sake, it is important that we have this fingerprint taken. But then I'm not happy it's been taken by a private entity, because the private entity don't have any security system. I mean, do not train police, do not train the military. It's the government that trains the military and trains the police. It's the government that trains lawyers. You get it? So, yet it's valuable when it comes to NIA. But to me, it is invaluable when it comes to the telcos. Because the telcos will not be using it for anything per se. Because at the end of the day, if people are, causing fraud or practicing fraudulent activities within the system, which you really want to capture, at the end of the day, it goes to the cybersecurity, the Ghana Police Service. So the Ghana Police Service, that surely will act on it and cause effect the arrest. If it's the US, the FBI, it's not the telcos. So the NIA, which is the state's own kind of data set, and the state is also having the police and other cybersecurity infrastructures in place, manned by state-sponsored funds, individuals. It is obvious that you shouldn't allow this to go to the telcos. Because the telcos will not effect arrest. Right. It will only be reported to the police, and the police will act on it. But if the police and all the state institutions have synchronized this data into their system, it's just a matter of reporting. I mean, it's a system, so just a click. Then Ghana Police Service, the cybersecurity part of it, all the institutions will have access to it, the fraud office will have access to it, and they will act on it. But it's not a matter of giving it to the private individual. Giving it to the private is invaluable. But with the states and its laws being the one to protect and ensure that our rights are not violated in terms of data protection, that becomes more valuable.
All right, we'll take a short breather. When we come back, there are two outstanding issues we would attempt to clear before the 15-18 minutes we have. One has to do with the fact that we're being told an app is being developed and the utilization will cost us 5 Ghana cedis in order to pay the application developer. Final one would be, how long is okay for a registration exercise? How long is not okay? Seeing that many are saying by the end of September would not have been able to register all Ghanaians. Do stay with us. And you're welcome back to the Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. So the first question I would ask you, Mr. Griffiths, would be that of whether we should pay 5 cedis for an application to ease the registration exercise or not. Would you pay if your card were not to have been registered?
Well, first of all, let me say that that's an illegality. I don't think that any institution can just get up and say that, they are charging for any service in this country without parliamentary approval. That's the first point that I need to make. So it is an I have said this on several platforms, and I hope that somebody will try the law, by taking the Ministry of Communication on. The app was developed, the SIM card registration app, and I'm assuming this current one is also developed by Kelney GVG, I'm told, which is a foreign company. What an insult. What an insult to have, a foreign company manage our biometric data. Now, the next thing also that has to be made is that I am yet to see remote self-service biometric enrollment system. And I've seen quite a few, most of the major biometric systems around the world. And nowhere would you take biometric remotely, serve yourself biometric, if I may say that. The institutions at the maximum will let you enter your alphanumeric data, but you still have to come and capture biometrics with them because it has to be supervised. It cannot be taken by yourself. There are security reasons which probably you cannot talk about in a medium like this, because you'll be educating probably people who may take advantage of the situation. So I think that having said that, let's also look, assuming that even it had parliamentary approval and therefore it is legal, assuming it has that, where is the 5 cedis coming from? Is it some form of revenue generation thing, or a tax that is coming, that is being used for, or is it paying for the app? And if it's paying for the app, per the minister's own calculation, she has about 25 and over million SIM cards that have not been registered. So even if 5 million of that take advantage of that, that's 25 million Ghana cedis. Does it mean we are paying 25 million Ghana cedis for the app? Assuming it's going to pay for the app. So we need to understand there should be more information. That is the reason why there is that requirement that Parliament must approve, because before it gets the seal of approval from Parliament, they would have asked all those questions and made sure that if it has to be trimmed, it is trimmed. You understand? So I don't think that it is proper for such a thing to be happening, especially at this time.
All right. Now, just under a minute, what time frame is workable for such an important registration exercise? That's the SIM registration exercise. Under a minute, so I can give the next 3 minutes to Mr. Kofi for his bite on the 5 cedis payment.
Well, first of all, there should be no time frame that is appropriate for such an important exercise. The minister said that she has 38% of the SIM cards registered. That's very good. Let's not dilute the data by cutting corners and doing things that are not supposed to be done. First SIM card exercise registration has failed because NIA was not on stream. If NIA is delayed, wait, because we don't have a deadline from ICAO or IEEE or what have you that we must finish our SIM card registration this year. So there's no need to rush. It's not a competition, you understand? If we finish And people can still call your phone and say, me send this car, come obi, and I bet your phone. So, and those things are still happening. It means we have failed. Because it's supposed to check all those things to make sure it ties an identity to every single SIM card. So let us not rush it. Let us not create things that do not exist within the biometric world.
All right. Mr. Kofi, I will give you the last bite on the 5 Ghana cedis payment. We are told this application, if we're going to use it, we must pay. What's your take on that?
What I think is quite unnecessary and also unfortunate that we are going to pay for this. I don't see why we should even have a deadline to register SIM cards. I will use some medium to say that they should abolish that deadline. I mean, they should have that free world for people to register, just that you may not be able to access certain services, and that will compel you to go and register your SIM card at any time. And not necessarily there should be a deadline, because the deadline is causing the problems. The deadline is extorting from people, and we are bringing this extortion, state-sponsored extortion. It's just wrong. So I know very well the Minister of Communication will be watching this issue, that take off the deadline, rather use restriction of services. So if I want to go to the bank and I don't have maybe my SIM card not registered or synchronized with the system, then you can keep me off the desk. Then I'll go out and go and do that. Anytime I would wish to do that. But for you to have a deadline, after the deadline, what happens? After you have blocked the SIM cards, what happens? I am quite certain that there's an issue with the money laundering thing. I mean, Ghana was first, once labeled as, was blacklisted.
Yeah.
So that is pushing, the European Union and the other countries are pushing the state to have such systems. Currently, NGOs are also going through similar ordeal to register the organizations under one umbrella called the NPO Secretariat. So the pressure coming from the hegemons is what is making government to have these deadlines. But it is on internal structures. You know, our culture is such a way that we delay in doing everything. The way we cook, the way we wash our clothes, everything we delay. Therefore, it is important to ensure that you do not put in this barrier of their deadline, but open it and restrict people from getting access to certain services. And that's simple. You can do that, and people will obviously go and register. And you don't have to come and stop people 5 Ghana cedis, which is quite illegal.
All right, Mr. Kofi, I will thank you for making time to join me tonight on Fact Sheet. Mr. Kofi is Executive Director for the Institute for Liberty and Policy Innovation, ILAPI. And we're also joined tonight by Mr. Kwame Griffiths, who's an IT expert, to throw more light on the issue of the re-registration exercise and the challenges therein and the way forward as a resolution of the bottlenecks and ensuring that all Ghanaians get their SIM cards registered. This has been today's edition of Fact Sheet, live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1 FM. With technical support from Mr. Damte and then Mr. Sifa Dankwa and the rest of the team, we'd like to thank you for being a part of our deliberations tonight, and we wish you a pleasant evening.